Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Hot Mess Life Coach with me, your host, Brian Hogan, both a hot mess and a life coach. This is the show for people trying to get it together while the world seems to fall apart. And I always like to say it seems to fall apart because it's not really falling apart. We are living through a transformation of human consciousness. And to that end, we are going to talk today about ways to transform, how to transform, and what the transformation of human consciousness looks like. And with me again today is my special guest and resilience coach, Morgan Barbrett. So I'm going to bring her on now as we introduce the topic, which is agreeing to disagree, how to allow multiple realities to exist. So
Hi,
good
Brian.
morning, Morgan, and welcome. Nice to have you with me today.
Yeah, happy to be here. Forgive my voice, I'm sick. So we're going to try to speak as best as we can, but I'm excited to chat.
Channeling a little bit of Kirstie Alley and Candice Bergen.
I don't get that reference, Brian.
That's two references that you don't get. Fine. They're just both really wonderful actresses from the 90s with smoky voices. Well, we'll leave it at that.
Oh, no. Okay.
Have you never
That's
heard
rough.
of Murphy Brown? Have you never heard of Murphy Brown?
No.
You have never heard of Murphy
Nope.
Brown?
No.
Okay, that's cool. Fine. Murphy Brown was this amazing show that won Emmy after Emmy after Emmy for like 10 years straight. But whatever. And then, have you heard of Cheers? You've never heard of Cheers? The show
Brian,
about
I don't watch
the show about
much
the bar
TV.
where everybody knows your name. It's okay.
How old is that show, Brian?
Ouch. I feel attacked. No, it's old. It's old. It's very old. It had a spin-off called Frasier. Have you ever heard of Frasier?
If you keep asking questions, you're going to keep hurting yourself.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Moving swiftly along to today's topic, which is agreeing to disagree. So Morgan and I are going to agree to disagree about whether or not she should have heard of Candice Bergen and Kirstie Alley and move into the rest of our topic for today. So
Oh, man.
Toltec, right? The Toltec wisdom. In one of the chapters, they talk about the parasite, and they use the concept of the parasite to describe something we touched on in an earlier episode, which is the judge and the victim and the belief system. And so the judge is that part of our mind that is a harsh critic that tells us we're not up to it. We should be doing more. We should be doing better. That kind of voice, that universal voice that we all share. And the victim is the voice in our head that believes that voice and goes, oh my gosh, you're right. I am not enough. I should be doing more. Woe is me. Life is hard. And the belief system is all the beliefs that allow us to believe fully what the judge and the victim are telling us. Like a belief would be like, I should achieve this thing by this age, or I should be married by this age, or I should be this much weight, or whatever. I should have this much hair I think is the example we used back in the previous episode.
Or I should have this many friends, or I should have a better relationship with XYZ, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, all the shoulds, right? So let's not should all over ourselves, because the shoulds are the belief system. And then they are believed by the victim and believed by the judge, and the judge uses them against the victim. So that mechanism, judge, victim, belief system, is what the Toltec call the parasite. And they liken it to a parasite because together, the judge, the victim, and the belief system are a living being that saps our energy little by little. And the parasite exists because of all the agreements that we've made. And so the reason I bring that up is because I wanted to talk today about what it means to agree to disagree. And the biggest way to agree to disagree, like with other people in your life or with your own culture, is to do so from a stance of non-judgment, because the judge is a component of the parasite, and the judge is fuel for the parasite, right? So if we disagree with culture, like I'm no longer going to strive to be straight. I'm no longer going to strive to be married. You know what I mean? I'm no longer going to strive to be rich or to achieve medals or to achieve accolades or to put letters after my name or whatever the thing is that we're disagreeing with. The point is to disagree from a place of non-judgment. So I don't suddenly say, I'm no longer going to buy into the whole like culture of a marriage and 2.5 kids and then say, I judge everybody who is buying into that culture because they're bad and wrong. No, because then you're still in the judge, victim, parasite loop. You're just you're just externalizing it. So we have to agree to disagree non-judgmentally. So if I want to stop the pursuit of achievement culture, for example, and try to live harmoniously now with where I'm at now and stop worrying about like getting to the next rung in the ladder, it doesn't suddenly mean I want to make everybody else who's trying to climb that ladder bad or wrong. They can have those agreements and they can agree with culture all they want. And I can disagree with culture all I want, because allowing others to have their agreements is the way that we agree to disagree. And agreeing to disagree adds harmony to the world, because people who have their own agreements with culture, if those agreements are making them unhappy, that's actually none of our business. Like it, but if our agreements with culture are making us unhappy, then we disagree with those, we learn to break those, we become more and more harmonious. It sets us free more and more and more. If by some miracle the divine energy wants to use that as an example and other people want to follow suit because they find that freedom and that joy attractive, great. But it's not up to us to try to help other people disengage or disagree with culture unless it's a journey that they want. So like I'm a coach. So of course, like part of my job description is to help people disagree with culture, but not everybody, just the people who tune into the show who are already trying to disagree with culture, or the people who seek me out as a client who are already trying to disagree with culture. I don't walk around the grocery store being like, those are bad for you. You should disagree with culture on putting the Cheetos in your cart. Like, who am I? That's between them and the lamppost. You know what I mean? So agreeing to disagree really means dropping judgment, dropping the judgment of ourselves, and then dropping the judgment of the outside world.
Yeah, so there's two layers to overcoming. You used the word parasite earlier. So that's like the dark part of our psyche that is responsible for all the judgment and making us feel bad for the way that we are, et cetera, et cetera. And the two layers to overcoming that dark part of our psyche that kind of makes us feel terrible and like we have to behave a certain way is we first have to disagree with the judgments that we have felt imposed on ourselves, but then we also have to agree not to impose whatever our beliefs are on other people, because both either believing what culture says that we should be against like our true nature, like that'll create suffering, but also feeling like we need to impose our beliefs and judgments on other people creates suffering as well. So in order to overcome I guess the different heads of this parasite or monster, that this is a metaphor, a metaphorical monster that creates suffering, you have to both release beliefs against yourself and release beliefs against others.
Yeah, exactly. Which is where the four agreements come in. And like, we've only talked about the first three so far, and we'll talk about the fourth one later on this season. But those agreements, to be impeccable with your word, to not take anything personally, and to not make assumptions, are the method. They're one of the methods we can use to disagree with our inner judge and to not impose our new agreements that we feel are empowering for us onto other people, but to allow them to have their agreements. That's the beauty of the four agreements, is that they help return our personal power to us. We talked really briefly about personal power in a previous episode, and what I loved about the chapter we were reading this week is that it says in there, it takes the same amount of power to break an agreement as it took to make an agreement, which is why we start off really small and we break the little agreements with ourselves. You know what I mean? Like, I should wake up earlier every day. Okay, maybe not. Maybe I should prioritize sleep. So that's a small agreement you can start to break or change, rather than like, I disagree with my worthlessness. Like, maybe that's harder. That's more deeply rooted. And so you have to have a bunch of your personal power returned to you. And then with all that personal power, you can break the larger and larger agreements. Personal power is less, it doesn't return to us as quickly if we break an internal agreement, but then immediately channel that energy into an external agreement that's judgmental, because it's still an agreement that keeps our personal power from us, because we're looking to the external, or we're looking towards like the problem or the flaw, as opposed to like looking towards the solution or looking towards harmony. And so the dream of heaven is created when we break our own little agreements that limit us but also allow everybody else to have their agreements, their limiting agreements, even if those agreements limit them. Then we create the dream of heaven, and we're walking around in the dream of heaven. We're walking around in our personal freedom, and we can start to break more and more and more of the agreements until we have a lot of personal power and can break major agreements. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you like I feel like anybody who hasn't watched like some of the earlier ones, like it's still kind of hard to grasp like the concept of agreements. So could you
Mm-hmm.
just rephrase again what you mean when you say agreements, just for anybody who's like joining right now?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so an agreement, it's not necessarily something conscious. When we talk about agreements in the Toltec philosophy, I guess what we're really talking about is conditioning and
Mhm.
enculturation and socialization. So, like when I was a kid, because my dad and mom got divorced when I was 2 years old, and my dad didn't pay a whole lot of attention to me, I might have this unconscious agreement that I need to strive for attention from men, for example, right? And so I don't think, well, I've done personal work, so I do have an awareness of some of my agreements, but sometimes we'll have these agreements like that kind of agreement, like, oh, I seek attention and validation from external parental figures. But we don't know we have that. What happens is we just behave in that way. Like I seek A's on my report card even when I'm sick. You know what I mean? I'll do homework even to the point of exhaustion or whatever. It's like that kind of thing. So it's like you don't the agreement isn't conscious. Like I have agreed to be a workaholic. It's not like that. It's like we are socialized into those patterns of behavior, or we're conditioned into those patterns of behavior because we interpreted something from our circumstance either early in life or anytime, and we've, instead of processing through the emotions or processing through the trauma, we gave it a meaning, and that meaning becomes an agreement, mostly unconscious, sometimes conscious. The whole Toltec journey is about mastering the art of awareness, because when we have awareness, we can look at the things that we can look at the pieces of our conditioning and say, oh, that's an agreement. So in that sense, calling them agreements is empowering, not disempowering, because it gives us
Mhm.
the agency to choose to disagree.
Mhm.
But we can't choose to disagree with the agreement until we bring the agreement into consciousness. So calling it
Yeah.
an agreement rather than calling it conditioning is a way of reminding our psyche that we get to disagree with this thing. It's not just conditioning. We have a choice to
Yeah.
disagree with it.
Yeah, and not only a choice to disagree, but a choice to as we do disagree, then we have an opportunity to choose to act differently, to choose to think about a situation differently, which is exactly how we can overcome this like negative part of our psyche, which is also referred to as the parasite here. But I think I've also heard of it referred to as like the X, like or part X, where
Hmm.
like it's a part of your psyche that like almost wants you to stay stuck or doesn't want you to feel better. And only by breaking agreements can we achieve a level of like personal freedom where we feel like we can actually just be ourselves unedited, uncultivated, unsocialized. Well, I mean, we're always going to be socialized, but being able to behave in a way that isn't like completely dictated by external factors.
Yeah, exactly. And this dark part of ourselves, this part X, this parasite, it I think on its in its own consciousness, it's not that it doesn't want us to feel better. It just wants us to stay in our comfort zone. It's
Mm, yeah.
appreciative of the familiar. And so it thinks the familiar, it has this belief system. This is as good as it's going to get. And so let's keep Morgan here. Let's keep Brian here because we've got
Yeah.
this figured out. Even though this is causing suffering and causing chronic illness and causing whatever, I have it figured out. The parasite has it figured out. And so the parasite's like, let's just hang right here. I've got this figured
Yeah.
out.
Which usually results in us not feeling better. So, but it's compassionate. So it probably, yeah, I see what you mean. Like it's not necessarily like I don't want you to feel better. I don't want you to achieve, a greater level of self-understanding and freedom within yourself. But it's like I want to protect you, and I'm going to try to protect you by not allowing you to do the things that would actually create happiness and freedom for you.
Yeah, exactly. Because it wants to keep us safe, which is why this concept of agreements is so powerful, which is why I resonate with the Toltecs so much, because they even say in there, when you break an agreement, you have to replace it with another agreement so that agreement doesn't come back. So if you break the agreement, like, I don't measure up, like my dad left my mom when I was young, which is my fault. Like if that's the agreement I have, like on an unconscious level, right? So I break that agreement. I have to replace it with a new agreement. And agreements, the first, second, and third agreement are these like big universal agreements. Like think of them like skeleton keys. Like you can take any little agreement you break and you can fit one of those three in the lock to replace it. So like the agreement that my dad left my mom, which means it's my fault. I can replace that with the agreement to never make assumptions. And that helps solve that agreement because I'm assuming that it's my fault. Or I can replace it with the agreement to never take anything personally because I don't know. I don't actually know whether it's my fault or not. Clearly it's not. Like as an adult, I do know that. But like when you're working through this stuff, you're not sure. But if you replace it with the agreement to not take anything personally, that fits in that lock too. You know, or the agreement to be impeccable with my word is like, rather than saying, my dad left my mom when I was a kid, so that's my fault, I could say, my dad left my mom when I'm a kid, and I don't know what to make of that. That's being more impeccable with my word. So any of these three major agreements is a skeleton key that can fit into the lock of any other agreement, whatever it is. Like it could be any small agreement that pertains to your specific situation, and you can take one of these three agreements and fit it in the lock and say, oh, how can that unlock more of my awareness? How can that unlock more of my consciousness? But if you just say, okay, I'm not going to believe the thought, it's all my fault that my dad left my mom. If you don't replace it with a new agreement, that thought comes back again later and blossoms in your mind later. It's called rumination. It's called emotional addiction. They're called habits, right? But if I have this new habit, oh, I'm going to not make assumptions. I'm going to not take things personally. Then when the thought, my dad left my mom, it's all my fault, comes back up, I go, oh, I have this agreement though that I'm not going to take that personally. And it keeps it from coming back. It keeps it from coming back so strong. This is not avoidance. This is about confronting things, looking at them squarely, and having an awareness that they are not what we think they are. So I'm not avoiding the emotions related to that old belief. I'm instead saying, with an agreement, I don't know for sure. I'm moving into uncertainty with awareness and letting the discomfort of uncertainty be okay with me.
Yeah. Which at first, when we move into uncertainty, it's scary because it's uncomfortable. And we talked about this last episode. We want to be certain about things because we think that if we know what's going on, then we have more control over it. But when you do move into that uncertainty and gain awareness with the uncertainty, it doesn't hurt as much as you expect. It actually does release a lot of the suffering that was created by our fake sense of certainty, where we were certain that the reality was harsher, more negative than it actually is.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So what have you found with this practice that's relatively new for you with the four agreements? What have you found as, can you think of an example of like a situation where you're like, oh, I'm going to insert one of these skeleton keys in here instead of my old mode of being?
I think I definitely lean on the second agreement. I think, yeah, the don't take anything personally
Mm-hmm.
more often than any of the other ones because like you can literally use that in any moment that you almost like it'll be really simple, like just the way somebody looks at you, or oh, like I have these friends that like haven't reached out in a little while. You could very easily take that personally and be like, oh, since I haven't heard from them in a couple months, maybe they don't care about me that much, maybe we're not that close. But if I don't take it personally and I reach out to them again and I say, hey, like I'd love to see you, and then we get to connect, it's like I very well, past me could have been hurt and felt offended or felt uncared for, unloved by not having these individuals, reaching out. But then when you have that agreement to not take it personally, then you're more likely to then go reach out, go try to connect, and then find that these people do actually care and do actually, want to maintain a relationship with you. But life's busy and it is what it is, right? But I personally, instead of spending however long feeling negatively about not connecting, then can just go on about my life and reconnect when it's time.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great example, because you're literally describing how choosing in the moment to remind yourself to follow the second agreement and not take it personally returns your personal power to you. Instead of keeping you
Yeah.
stuck in suffering or even moving into suffering, you're able to take action, whether that's to go about your day or to reach out and try to connect again. That's like huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's no small
100%.
thing. Our personal power is what propels us through our day, unless we're on automatic pilot being propelled through our day, or dragged through the day rather, by the parasite, which is sort of the normal commonplace state of being in humanity. Is we communicate through gossip, we get dragged around by the parasite, which is the judge and the victim in our belief system, and we do that whole thing through unawareness. And at the end of the day, we come home, we have to veg out, have drinks, do whatever we can do to relax, take our Klonopin, and then go to sleep. You know what I mean? And like that's like sort of the modus operandi of human nature
Yeah.
right now. But it's just because something is commonplace doesn't mean it's natural. And our natural
Yeah.
state of being is the state of love. And we can return to that with these agreements, these really powerful skeleton keys that can unlock and unwind any twisted culturization, enculturation or socialization or conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. I mean, I think we can end it there today.
Yeah, I think that's a good stopping point.
Right on. So thank you, everybody who's tuning into this or listening from the future or watching the replay. We really appreciate it. If you want to find out more about Morgan and what she does, you can do that at selfloveatlas.coach or on Instagram at Morgan_Barbrett. Or if you want to learn more about me and what I do, you can find me on thebrianhogan.com or on social media at thebrianhogan. In the meantime, we will be here next week on Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern for episode 9 of the Hot Mess Life Coach. Until then, be hot, be messy, and be blessed. Much love.
Mm-hmm.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.